Next, we are going to move into a discussion that, Craig indicated a little bit about and talking about, the aquifers. The aquifers are these huge storage areas that we have for water. And I don't know if we've always thought of them that way, but we're thinking more about them that way, that these are these underground reservoirs that are able to hold this valuable resource. Before, it was this kind of thought of this unlimited available groundwater resource, and we know that isn't necessarily the case. It does require some conscious management. It requires some intent to keep the aquifers healthy. And so this morning we do want to have a discussion on this topic about the aquifers, focusing on the sub-districts that Craig mentioned with the groundwater administration rules, which were promulgated here in Division 3. And looking at some of the challenges that are going forth in the community around the aquifers and how the sub-districts are working to manage those aquifers. I do want to introduce you to our panelists who we have here with us this morning. And first of all, we're going to I'll mention their names and then I'll go through some of their brief bios, but we'd like to welcome as our panelists, Amber Pachecho from the Rio Grande Water Conservation District. She's a Wonder Woman there that serves many different roles, and we'll talk about some of those roles here in a second. George Whitten, who's a wonder in his own right, from the north part of the valley, as a farmer and rancher there, definitely has been actively engaged and involved, and has had a strong desire of seeing healthy and sustainable aspects associated with our aquifers. And then also joining us is Sarah Parmar. She comes and joins us from Colorado Open Lands. And we're happy to have Sarah with us. So if I believe we have all of them on screen right now. Perfect, we do. Give you a little bit of background into Amber. We talked about that she comes from, she's the Deputy General Manager for the Rio Grande Water Conservation District with Senator Simpson working in his role as a citizen legislator. She graciously took on the role of the Deputy General Manager for our district and acts in his absence as he would act if he was there in an active role. And they work well together. She represents our district very well, and she has all the capabilities, talents, skills to be able to operate the district anytime the absence of the general manager is gone. But Amber, even when the general manager is there, has many different roles that she works in within the administration of the district, especially in the area of groundwater management. Amber is responsible for operating and helping to facilitate 3 sub-districts in our area: sub-district number 2, sub-district number 3, and sub-district number 6. She's also responsible for the delivery of services in the district users and the coordination of all those district functions, which go from the south end of the valley and to the central part of the valley, which includes the large sub-district of sub-district number 6, which I am actually a part of as well as an ex officio member. Amber is a lifelong resident of the San Luis Valley. She's been with the district for 17 years and enjoys helping the water community. She's very, again, passionate, very involved in finding solutions in those issues that face us here in the San Luis Valley. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration with an emphasis in accounting from Adams State University, and a Master's of Business Administration with an emphasis in Public Administration from Adams State University. So thank you for being here, Amber, and welcome. Next, I'd like to highlight some of the background of George Whitten. George Whitten is a farmer and rancher in the northern part of the San Luis Valley, and he is also a member of Subdistrict number 5 and one of the founding members and part of the formation of Subdistrict number 5. So he, like many of us, he was born into ranching, and he was born into ranching in Saguache, Colorado. His grandfather was a great influence as a part of it and established a sheep, cattle, and farming operation on the north end of the valley in the late 1800s, 1893 to be exact. George is a 3rd generation, been actively involved in managing the ranching operation since the early 70s. He definitely believes in a holistic management approach and definitely applies a lot of those holistic management principles to his ranch. And he's been involved in that for over 40 years. He served on the board of directors of the Rio Grande Water Conservation District for over 25 years and remains active in his role, especially as a part of his contributions to Subdistrict number 5. He currently serves as a board member for the Colorado Department of Agriculture Commission, so definitely provides a representative perspective from the San Luis Valley. So we're definitely appreciative of that, George. And he's a founding member and current president of Sweetgrass Co-op, which is a grass-fed beef co-op providing direct sales of beef to Colorado and New Mexico, and they've been doing so since 2003. So welcome, George. Very happy that you're able to join us. And finally, Sarah Parmar, who's able to join us this morning from Colorado Open Lands. And she leads a lot of Colorado Open Lands private land conservation work. So as you know, with land conservation, a key resource, a key aspect of that conservation work comes in the area of water. And we'd like to explore that more, especially as it pertains to our aquifers, potentially in our groundwater use. Sarah comes to Colorado Open Lands from Arizona, where it's probably much warmer today, although Colorado's warming up, but maybe not to the same level of Arizona. She has completed her Master in Science in Agriculture and Resource Economics, conducting research on land and wildlife issues, especially on the law of conservation easements. Her passion for Western land protection stems from her background growing up as a sixth generation on a cattle ranch in southeastern Arizona, where her parents and the ranching community established the Malpai Borderlands Group, a collaborative conservation organization. Sarah is the past president of the board of directors for Regarding Vision, a Denver-based food systems nonprofit, and is the current chair of the Colorado Conservation Easement Oversight Commission. So Sarah, thank you very much for joining us. And good morning to our panelists. We're very happy that you could be here for this important topic, because we talked about aquifers. You know, they provide several different levels of connection to our water resource, not only as storage, but also in terms of being able to supply, be sustainable into the future, what we have in terms of water availability. So Amber, if I could start off with you. I know you're heavily involved with the sub-districts. I know I mentioned that you were involved in 2, 3, and 6 right now, but you've really been involved in all of them to some extent. And you were also involved, I believe, in the formations of 4 and 5 as they worked through. And we've seen some challenges over the past few years, and especially, as Craig mentioned, challenges in sub-district number 5. So I wonder if you might offer us a brief overview of just the sub-districts, the sub-district process, you know, their purpose, where they've come, you know, where they started, where they came from. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Armando, and thank you everyone for allowing me some time today. But as Craig Cotton alluded to earlier, there are currently 7 sub-districts that are formed in the San Luis Valley, 6 of them under our district and 1 under the Trinchera Water Conservancy District. All of the sub-districts have been working for a long time. I'd say the better part of 2 decades to get formed and fully operational, and that hard work continues today. It hasn't been an easy process for sure, and lots of community support to get us where we are. But as Armando mentioned, you know, we've had some challenges and we've had some successes. So you know, successes is that we have 6 sub-districts operating under approved plans for what annual replacement plans, excuse me, and they're making up their depletions to the streams and working towards aquifer recovery in the sub-districts where we've had some issues, and we've done a good job there and continue to move forward. And we've had challenges with sub-district 5. And George is a member of sub-district 5 and can probably add a lot more, but they weren't able to pump for 3 months last year because they weren't able to find replacement sources on Swatch Creek. So definitely have had some challenges getting them operating, but they continue to move forward and try to find solutions to keep that community sustainable and keep them working together and solving their groundwater issues. And as Craig mentioned, sub-district 1, of course, has been the sub-district that's been around the longest, formed back in 2006 and operational since 2012. Their challenge is really recovering the unconfined aquifer and how do they get back to a level that was decreed in their formation, and what can they do to get there within the time they've been given. Their board right now is working on a new plan, kind of shifting their whole focus of that sub-district to try to become a 1-for-1 sub-district, or only being able to pump what they bring in surface water into that area. So it's a big paradigm shift in that area, but those farmers and well owners in that area are recognizing that they've got challenges, and they're working hard to make a change there and get that aquifer moving in the right direction. So we've got a lot of work to do, but a lot of community support and a lot of efforts going forward. And Sarah has can talk a little bit about some of those thoughts we have about how maybe we can work towards these goals.
Thank you, Amber. Appreciate that
Thanks.
overview and background. I think the key aspect when we start talking about the sub-districts is really the grassroots nature associated with the decision making. It takes it to a local level. It's not just one that represents the entire valley. It really looks at their particular response area where they work in. And it's also looking at that relationship between the hydrological connection between surface water, groundwater, and trying to find good management principles associated with that. Well, for our panel, we'd have about 20 minutes this morning to get started. So I just asked the panelists, as hopefully we can get through a series of questions. And so for your comments, just do we keep them, to maybe about 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And so we get through a series. But George, I do want to turn it over to you. You've worked or you do currently work and actively engaged in subdistrict number 5, and just see if you might offer some thoughts on some of the challenges you've experienced, but maybe also to continue on Amber's point about the formation. What was it from the beginning of the formation, because you've done that within the last couple of years, but then also going through that 3 months of not pumping, how that impacted your community, how it impacted the sub-district. So any thoughts you might have on any of those topics?
Well, thank you, Armando, and welcome everyone. It's always a pleasure to have these, and it's very informative for all of us, I think. I looked up, I found some old notes the other day from 2014 when we were working on forming subdistrict number 5. And I think I've been to a meeting at least once a month, if not 4 or 5 times a month. That's 9 years. I think there's a book called 9 Years Before the Mast or something. It's been a long slog, and but I've really, it's a very interesting thing that happens with the formation of these subdistricts, because it's about communities and communities trying to resolve issues that go way back to the very when people first turned water out of creeks and created these water rights, and the way that the whole system is set up with first in time, first in right. And what that does is that in some instances sort of sets one property owner against the other right from the beginning, because they need to divert their water and get all their water first, and then it goes to number 2 and number 3 and on down the line. And that's the way it's been done for a long time. I grew up on living over near La Garita on the Rio Grande Canal system, which is more of a communal system where there's multiple owners of a single water right or set of water rights. And so that's the way I was raised, was all of us working together to maintain a ditch and maintain water rights and that. And up here in Swatch, it's a little bit different, because it's a creek that is very much individual ranches and individual water rights all the way up and down the system. And because of the long history of that first in time, first in right, that we have always been not really united around water, but more divided, I think, in the Swatch system. And that's been a big part of that cultural impact of that system imposed on a natural resource, and the way that we try to make a living from that has set a tone, or set a community of people that, while they belong to the same community, those water rights issues go back generations and in families. And so it's a very interesting dynamic. Then you add the addition of wells. They started drilling wells here in the 1890s, drilled a lot of artesian wells, and people began to use groundwater to irrigate. And then those small wells were amalgamated into bigger wells, and always in our history, my father, my grandma, we always talking about, I wonder what these wells are doing to the creek, and everybody wants to blame somebody else or their current situation. And so here we are as a larger community, the San Luis Valley and the Rio Grande Water Conservation District, mostly trying to solve that issue. And we're one of the few places in the world, I think, where we're trying to deal with that. And I'm an internal optimist, and I'm extremely optimistic that we will have an ARP by April in subdistrict number 5. There's some things that are happening that are really encouraging right now. a lot of them having to do with those community dynamics and trying to get that community to work together. And I really look forward to moving forward and managing the aquifer and getting down to the business that the sub-district was designed to do. So.
Yep. Thanks, George. I think those are great perspectives. I think you bring a lot of insight into the process. And one of the points that you made, if there's one thing about water, it's they're associated with water is a lot of meetings. You know, there's a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, trying to create a lot of dialogue. Because as you mentioned, with any precious resource, there is kind of an adversarial approach to it. We've seen it throughout history, whether it's precious metals, real estate, oil, whatever it is, and water is definitely in some of those categories. They say that for the adversarial part, the water was made for fighting. Whiskey was made for drinking. So drink up. Sarah, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the sub-districts and what we have the process here in the San Luis Valley, but if you have some thoughts on the aquifers and the sub-districts, please, I'd like to give you a few moments.
Great, thanks for that, Armando, and thanks so much. I'm standing in today for one of our San Luis Valley project managers, Charlie Goodson, so thanks for letting me step in. I was fortunate enough to start working down in the San Luis Valley in 2009, mostly on the east side of the valley, in the Culebra Basin, which looks so very tough on those charts that Craig shared. But I began working with the Acequia community several years ago. And then many of you probably know Judy Lopez, who started an office for Colorado Open Lands really in the valley itself, in Alamosa, and we now have 2 staff members because we needed 2 people to replace Judy in Alamosa. So we've got a groundwater focus really, as well as an acequia focus of our work, and hopefully lots of folks participating today are familiar with the great work that's been done by the Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust, your local land trust in the valley, protecting a lot of surface water rights and irrigated lands in the San Luis Valley. And when we think about the tools that land trusts use, conservation easements, usually those are meant to really protect resources that are providing a public benefit and protect against some kind of threat. So the Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust, when it was formed, was really responding to a potential threat of surface water potentially leaving the basin. And so what they have done over the years is to really protect that surface water, keep it in its historic use, keep it irrigating agricultural lands. When we think about kind of the next chapter of these challenges, and specifically the challenges of the sub-districts trying to come up with tools to help those producers transition to less groundwater dependence, less groundwater use, to support that aquifer recovery. Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust and Colorado Open Lands began working with Amber and other folks at the Rio Grande Conservation District about 3 years ago, I would say, on an idea. We said, you know, can we think about using conservation easements in a different way to address this kind of a challenge? So instead of preventing things that we're used to seeing in conservation easements, like limiting home site development on land, can we think about using easements to limit groundwater pumping? And Colorado Open Lands, Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust held a series of meetings with irrigators across the sub-districts about 2.5 years ago to see if this sounded like an interesting idea to folks. And what we heard from people was, you know, we really need flexibility. One of the challenges with some of the existing tools is that it's kind of all or nothing. We either have to stop pumping and get paid for that and fallow our land completely, or you know, there's nothing, no payments that we can receive to kind of just reduce our pumping by some degree. What we heard from the sub-districts and from the groundwater managers was we need some certainty, we need some permanency. And so one of the benefits of using conservation easements in this way is that landowners can voluntarily determine how much they think that they can reduce their pumping and change their operation accordingly. And then we are able to actually value that financially within a conservation easement, use some of those tools, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be flexible, but it is permanent. It's a permanent restriction that's tied to that particular operation.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And I think with this, we're seeing how necessity drives innovation. And we're seeing some different innovative ideas that we haven't seen before. And so I think this is exciting as a part of it. So we have about, we are running a little late on our agenda, so we only have about 10 minutes left. So I do want to pose a couple of questions to you. But the first one I think is around the issue of sustainability. Sustainability comes up very, very often, and people always struggle with what does sustainability really mean? You know, what does it mean for in general? What does it mean for a sub-district? What does sustainability mean for an aquifer? So George, if I could start you off with that question, and then we'll move our way around the panel.
Well, one of the things that we've done in sub-district number 5 in our ARP is that sustainability is our basic metric. We didn't use fees to control pumping, but rather we are watching very closely monitoring the condition of the aquifer, and thinking about snowpack, and thinking about, you know, how can we actually make this a sustainable situation and keep our aquifer intact. And so in this, we've asked the members of the sub-district to reduce their pumping by 30% this coming year. We sent out a letter, and so people are going to be part of the mandated to reduce their pumping, their 10-year average, by 30% next year, which is about the same as it was last year total over the whole aquifer, or over the whole sub-district, by having our wells shut off. So we are serious about cutting back the use of groundwater and maintaining that aquifer. And as we go forward, we're going to need, you know, more monitoring and understand the aquifer better all the time. But overall, I feel like we're off to a good start as far as our premise, and that sustainability of that aquifer will be first and foremost on our minds as we manage for the future. On my own ranch, I've cut back a lot more than that. So this is serious business, and one of the things that we need to do is learn how to use less water, but not necessarily just by drying up land. There are ways you can manage, especially one of our big advantages in the north end of the valley is we're covered, mostly the soils are all covered with grass. And there are these big alluvial meadows that have been the part of Saguache Creek for millions of years, or at least hundreds of thousands of years. And so we have an intact system up here. We don't have a lot of farm ground that's been turned over, and it's really hard to get to hold water. And so the water holding capacity of these soils is pretty good, and our aquifer is, as a result, in good shape. We just need to keep that up. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, George, I don't know. I think if we knew if there were exact answers, some of these items would be easy. Some of these aspects would be easy. So I think that's part of it. It's part of perspective. It's part of adding and contributing to the discussion and to the dialogue. Sarah, thoughts on sustainability?
Thanks. I'll just keep it brief. It seems like I know that Rio touched on a couple of things here, which is the fact that, you know, there's the internal challenges that the valley faces in terms of pumping more than Mother Nature is putting back into the system over time. And that is obviously what led the folks here in this room to work so hard to create the sub-districts. And then there's the fact that Mother Nature may continue to put in less over time, and the potential of a changing climate and the need to continually adjust to that. And I think in our work, we think about sustainability kind of running both ways. So the reason that people are working so hard is that they recognize that the sustainability of their own individual operations, the sustainability of this community does rely on the sustainability of the whole system, of the aquifers, of the surface water working together. But also that each individual producer has to think about their own viability and how they adjust to support that greater sustainability of the community. So I appreciate that people are kind of working both ways. And I know we're working kind of at the producer end to help people adjust so that ideally all boats rise accordingly as everybody makes some sacrifices.
Thanks, Sarah. There's always those dynamics in a relationship. You know, what is the reciprocity? How does it connect? Very, very, very challenging dynamics. We don't control everything. You talked about Mother Nature. How much is Mother Nature putting back in? That's also tough for sustainability because that's not something we can necessarily influence or control. So, Amber, some thoughts on sustainability?
Sure. Thank you, Armando. And George and Sarah are both right. You know, it's important to both the individual and the community that as a whole, we all help with this issue of sustainability. As George mentioned, Subdistrict 5 is considered sustainable, and so is Subdistrict 3 and Subdistrict 6 right now. Sustainability is defined in Senate Bill 222 and for the confined aquifer, and in Subdistrict 1's Plan of Water Management, it was defined there in their decree. And subdistricts continue to monitor and discuss and look for new ways to deal with the issue. Is we all do understand that we are overusing our groundwater resources, but how can we reduce that and still remain a viable agricultural community? So we look at lots of different options like temporary fallowing and new crops and different programs that can help farmers to maybe have an opportunity to set the land out for a time and still be able to come back into farming in another year. You know, maybe we're an option for them now, not necessarily the negative effect of subdistricts, but now maybe we're another tool in their toolbox of, well, it looks like another drought year. What could I maybe do to work with a subdistrict to lay out some ground this year, and it'll benefit the aquifer and the subdistrict and my operations. So sustainability is high on all of our radars, even in those subdistricts that are considered sustainable. We're continuing to watch, and we continue to be concerned with our current drought conditions that just each year it seems like it keeps coming.
Yeah, it just keeps in and along the way, we don't have the same set of variables or same set of circumstances. So that's also what we work through in the dynamics. Well,